Dr. Andrea Siodmok is the head of the UK Policy Lab in the Cabinet Office. She is both a practitioner and design thinker with an international reputation for applying design for public good. Formerly Chief Design Officer at the UK Design Council, she's currently head of the UK Government's Policy Lab and a Deputy Director at the Cabinet Office.
Thank you. Well, it's great to be here. Thank you for all coming. If you can hear me okay, or if you can't hear me, just shout at the back and I'll speak up. I'm a little bit jet lagged, so hopefully I won't fall asleep during this presentation. My children are asleep though at the back, so I don't think they're going to wake up, but they took the opportunity of going to sleep rather than sit through my talk. Thank you for the invite. It's really great to be here. I'm actually en route to do a workshop with Liz Saunders. So we are going to be running some stuff the week after next. And so being here, I'm here also to give a talk on blockchain technology from the point of view of the UK government. But tonight, and this talk, is about the work that I've been doing over the last 3 years in something called Policy Lab. And the Policy Lab, for those of you who don't know, is a design and digital and data science lab. We're based within the UK government and in this building here, a shot I took on my way to work, in the Treasury, which is quite near to Big Ben. So Sarah, who's here, I work with in the Cabinet Office, and Lisa, who you know as well, will have all been through the doors of this building. Very austere government building. And the lab is right in the heart of Whitehall, so this is like the London Eye, and then you've got all the departments around us. And one of the real benefits is to be within walking distance of the people you want to do work with. So for us, there's probably a 15-minute walk to the policy leads of each of the major 16 departments. And that's really crucial in our ability work. We call ourselves a pop-up lab because we haven't actually created a dedicated innovation space. We consciously chose not to. And instead, we see the whole of government as the space in which we work. So we pop up literally in different departments' environments. So in the slides that I'm going to show you, you'll see the work that we've been doing and the different places we find ourselves in. And some of those are very grand and very elaborate and very historic. And then others are in darkened rooms without windows, where there is basic, if any, materials. So our tools and techniques need to be really adaptable to work at the level of maybe 200-300 people would be our biggest lab sessions, and down to the level of maybe 5 people. So we're trying to evolve the way that we work. In terms of what we do, we set up 3 years ago pretty much with a blank piece of paper. The team who set it up at the Cabinet Office had been to see MindLab in Denmark and had looked at different models, Citra and others. And the question was, what would work in the UK government? What would work in the unique setting that the UK is within London and within the context of the work that the government needed to do? So this is one of the elaborate rooms, actually, in the Foreign Office. And we started with blank piece of paper. So this is one of our very first workshops. And we've used the process of actually doing work to discover what work needed to be done and what tools would work and what wouldn't. So it's very experimental and exploratory. And through that, we relatively quickly find out what doesn't work and stop doing that. And it's kind of space to do that. So we have 4 kind of basic ways that we work. The lab projects, we do about 10 a year, and those allow us to get really close to a policy team. And through those projects, we can actually measure before and after. And I've got 3 projects I'm going to relatively quickly show you that speak to very different aspects of our work. And in terms of doing 10 projects, one of the good things about that is it gives you this portfolio where different things happen in different projects. So you can sort of cast your eye over all of them, but also you're not so wedded to the success of one particular project that you kind of overcook it. So there's a little bit of license that some of them will be more or less successful. And often for reasons we don't necessarily know, and that's part of the learning that we'll look across projects. We do lab sprints, which are much lighter. We used to call them lab light, which can be 1 hour, they can be a couple of days, they include things like policy schools, and our rule for this kind of work is someone has to leave doing something they couldn't do before they arrived in that session. So we don't really count the traditional talk and chalk in the lab lights. We look to create a change in behaviour or a change in someone walking away with a technique. So through the projects we do 10 a year. Through the lab lights we reach around 2,000 civil servants and public sector workers each year. And we quite like the flip between the two because one allows us to get in depth and get really wrapped around a team and support them, and in the other we're very rapidly learning what works and what doesn't. And also we can keep the energy levels quite high. And in a way, if you just do the light stuff, you never get to the impact. But if you just do the impact stuff, you can get a bit bogged down. So in any 1 week, we have this kind of really nice blend that keeps our own energy level quite high. And that's been important to us as sort of continuing to invest our energies. The lab sessions we've started to do more recently, and these are a little bit like this, where we'll put up a talk, a topic, a speaker, and we'll invite people across government to join us and share thoughts. And the experiments are relatively rare, but I don't think I have any photos of them with me. But they are much more provocative in testing out things that have never been tried before, perhaps. So an array of different work. It keeps the team fresh. We have some designers, we have an ethnographer in-house, and then we also have senior policy makers who form part of the lab team, either on secondment or within the core team. So it's an interdisciplinary team, and the core of what we do is projects. And all of the learning happens through the projects, including for the departments who commission us, and they pay to work with us. So the UK government has around 400 priorities within its manifesto that it is made a commitment to deliver, and therefore our work can fall within any of those. So we're not interested perhaps in any particular policy area, but the full breadth. And this presents quite a unique challenge for us in the Policy Lab because we're not specialists. So I don't have in-depth knowledge of farming policy or transport policy or energy policy. So what we bring is best process rather than best practice. And what is in common across all of our projects is the way we work, rather than us coming with a particular expertise. If you've seen the movie Spectre, it was filmed in our office, the building that you saw at the start. And what was interesting is James Bond walks through our office, and then when they did all the interior shots, they used studio, because our office doesn't really conform to the stereotype of the 1950s sort of oak-panelled environment. Those rooms do exist, but most of our work looks like any other modern workplace. So for the sort of Bond films, they want to kind of capture a sense of the civil service that really doesn't exist anymore, even though that is probably the public's imagination of what we still look like and act like. So this is a minister working with a team on trade, with personas, and a project that we got involved with to drive up exports. And this is a really great project because the department had an amazing team. We brought our Policy Lab team in, and we worked really closely, and we learned something and they learned something. So we do a whole bunch of projects. We use different tools and techniques, as I say. This is some work we did on childcare, working with business, where in London there's the Shard building, and this is on, I think, the 11th floor. And so we used Warwick University Business School space and the Sage, and in that environment we could create our evidence safari, where we laid out all of the evidence and then engaged with business to help government solve challenges. So this was about government not having direct levers, direct influence, but wanting to use its convening power to bring businesses together to solve a challenge. And in this case, it was how can businesses provide childcare for their employees government was providing childcare and money towards that through a policy, but how can we do more by business doing the equivalent, or perhaps even more in their own jurisdiction? So this project won an award recently, but was one of many where we've been out and about across London. Another project here on trade we held at Google in London. And the methodology, as I said, is very portable. So there's some shots from a recent evidence safari, and we kind of lay out all the different things that we're interested in. So this particular section of our evidence safari is looking at futures and different technologies, and we just knocked these together quite quickly in PowerPoint. This is our first kind of prototype, and what we're hoping to do this year is to work with the Government Office to Science a little bit more in building some of the 8 great technologies we know that are going to change the world into the evidence safari. So we have these different stands, and you go and interact with that, and then you have an interactive session from that. So for us in the lab, there are 3 big Ds that will drive transformation. We talk about design, digital, and data. And when taken together, they have great potential to be enablers. So a lot of the discussions and talk about the future, you'll see various sort of acronyms where people are describing some of the negative challenges of technology and the sort of volatility, complexity, uncertainty, for example. We see design, digital and data as a really positive force, an optimistic force that will enable change. So for us, we talk about gov to the power of all of us, and this I guess, where the thread of some of the social change comes in, which is to look at what can open government do by bringing in different voices, different expertise, and different potential to actually make change happen. So I just showed this. It's quite a complicated slide, but it just gives a flavour of the way that we see the world as with a whole set of different expertise, and some of who may own problems, some of who may enable problems, and some of who are experts, and the complex relationships between those. And on every project, it's different. So in the lab, we create this virtual space where we can convene people, bring them together, and we're working with universities, we're working with experts, designers, So we'll piece together this. So I have 3 projects I just wanted to share so that you get a real flavour of the work that we do. And they're all very different. So we've probably run 20 of major projects in recent months, but here are 3. So the first one's quite a traditional one. This is a project we started with. And our team, this project started on day 3. So I had a job interview, accepted the job, and they said, when can you start? And I said, when would you like? And they said, we have a workshop next week. I said, okay, let's do that. So it was day 3. It was a fantastic project because it came from the police themselves, and they said at the moment only a small percentage, less than 10% of people will report their crime online. Mostly they would go to a police officer or a police station. So how might we better serve victims of crime through using digital technologies in new ways? But they were very focused on this number, how can we increase the percentage of people who report online? And we were more interested in zooming out to what is the victim's experience. So you'll see the victims. It was fantastic being within government because working with the police also, they had victims who were willing to engage with us and who had experienced crime but then had said they were happy to be contacted again. So we were able very quickly to set up our ethnography, understand the experiences people had had, and spend time, in some cases, in their homes and really get a full picture of what was happening. But then from that, we were then able to speak with the policing minister on the same day. So this felt really sort of agile, I guess, to go from on-the-ground experiences to the minister and be able to feed that back in. And then having gathered together a whole range of different user experiences, many of which you'll recognise through user journey mapping, we then held a workshop with some of the police, the commissioners, criminologists, and different parts of the system, academics, and so on. And we went from this, everyone was so excited first thing in the morning, there was palpable energy. And then it doesn't come through in the picture, but I'd walked in the morning at like 8 o'clock and it was electric already, so there was a sense that something important might happen. By the afternoon, people were making things and building potential new services. And Gloria Laycock, for example, who I'd worked with previously from University College London as part of the Designing Out Crime programme at the Design Council, I'd never seen her before do prototyping. And they went and enacted their own robbery outside Buckingham Palace. And she had her bag stolen as they were filming it to make their prototype. And I remember thinking, this is just going to, it's quite high risk. It might look like she actually is being robbed outside Buckingham Palace and she's a criminologist, and the headlines kind of were writing themselves. But she just got so into it, and it was amazing to see how those techniques could very quickly help people work together. And some of the ideas were very radical and very different, and other ideas informed our actual work that went forward that was a bit more, as you would imagine, a bit more sort of grounded. So we worked with the Royal College of Art. I went up there and spent time working with students as well to prototype future services. So we're really pleased that's gone off, in case that's really important. I know it is really important, but that's my timings. So if it comes on and says it's timed out, then we're good. So we're really pleased at the end of that project that the Home Secretary then, the current Prime Minister of the UK, was able to use the word prototyping, which was one of the things that we'd set up the lab to do. And then to see her talk about this work, the fact that the savings the police were hoping to make from it were around £3.7 million per year, 180,000 hours of police time. So she was able to make this announcement and how our design-led process had enabled this to happen. Okay, so I have two more to talk about, and then I'm done. So the second project, which is again very different, we never know what's going to come in our projects, which department will get in touch, what they'll want to do. Our second project was working with the Government Office for Science, and we were looking in this about what is it going to be like in the future when our society has a lot more older people in it. So what is that like both for those who are older and those who are younger? And the Government Office for Science had spent 18 months interviewing academics, doing round tables, and they generated a report of 200,000 words. And their challenge was that not as many people were reading the full report as they had hoped. I think they said some people hadn't read even the summary, and that was worrying them. So there was all this amazing data, but it just wasn't getting to people. So with some designers, we did some visualization, designed our own evidence safari again, put the data into a format that would allow us to run workshops. And then from that, got policymakers in the room to interact with those different evidence futures, and then we can actually take that forward into ideas. So we facilitated that process. And we've done that a few times since, and it's worked really well. But it leads us into some of the more cutting-edge work that we've been doing around speculative design, where we're looking at different futures, future of transport, for example, working on future, as I mentioned, of ageing. And in these projects, we don't really know what the future will be like, so it is a kind of speculation. So what we've been doing in those areas is we're using critical design as a kind of approach, if you like, to create these fictional narratives, and then from that, use those to inform and engage the policymakers. So I'll just show you one. This is from the Ageing Project, and the fictional narrative that we created was a robot repair workshop. So it's a shop that you can go to in the future where you get your robots fixed, because we know that robotics, autonomous, Internet of Things will be quite commonplace in the future, and therefore what will happen is you'll have to have a shop to go and fix it. And then from that, with older people and also younger people, we're able to get them to think in the future and then engage with them rather than they kept thinking about the present, and this was about getting them into those other worlds. So the final case study I just wanted to show you was probably our biggest and most significant piece of work in a policy area that is much more traditional, and therefore, you just saw the work which was much more speculative, looking at technology and the future. This is about a major piece of current policy around people who are not in work and are on a benefit and a support for that. So, and the reason I include this is because this was a really different way of working for us to bring design and data science together, and we hadn't done that before. So our challenge was, how can we support people to manage their health conditions and stay in work? We knew that if people come out of the workplace because of health and health conditions and ill health, that's hard to say when you're jet lagged, then they are much less likely to get back into work, and the longer that they aren't in work, then their mental health conditions may decrease and so forth. So we know that they're better in work if we can do that. So what we did is, through this work, we did our usual kind of convening of bringing people together. We work with an agency in London called Us Creates, and that's one of our tools, is that we don't do all the work in-house, we actually engage out with a network of designers and others. We work with a data science team as well. And we're able to map everyone who had received this particular support allowance. So because we're in government, we know the numbers of people who are on the recipients of this benefit, and we could map those using the data science. And then from that, we're able to do some categorization and segmentation, and it became interesting to us that there were two groups that really just didn't conform to what we expected to see in this data. They were relatively well, and they had a different set of risk factors. So this was hard data coming together then with the work that we did with ethnography. So from the data science, we segmented, and then we went into work with 9 users. One of the challenges is if you only work with 9 users, you can't create policy by anecdote. You can't expect a minister to respond to 9 people. But what was interesting here is that we actually, through the data science, had been able to identify a large cohort. So bringing the two together, very empirical data, and then the highly qualitative data. So big data and thick data together. And that made a much more useful kind of evidence base to move forwards. And then we went into prototyping again, working with the service providers, the general practitioners, so the doctors, working with the job centre, local staff, and created a back-to-work service, a prototype that would help people get back to work, that involved coaching and so forth. And we're able to pilot that. Well, I say pilot, it wasn't pilot, it was prototyping. So testing it around the country in different areas, all on the same day. So I was down here in Cornwall, in a field, with long-term unemployed people, and we were testing out the service, and we didn't have any internet connection, and you immediately could see the things that weren't going to work that seemed to be possible when you were actually in the office, when you were on the ground. And the most incredible thing about that work was the team that I met in Penzance, because not only did they kind of open their doors and say to us from Whitehall, come down, spend time with us, we'll connect you to people who are on this benefit, but also they really embraced this way of working, and they started to work in different ways. They then wrote us a blog about what their experience was, and then we went back to see them. They said, you know what, we haven't stopped doing the things that we did with you. We keep doing that. We're now doing on other things. So in a way, our role was to kind of unlock their potential to do innovation and to think differently about how they might change. So in terms of what we do, the kind of complexity and the challenges of system stewardship, which Christian Basson talked about at Mind Lab and wrote about in Design for Policy, is we definitely sort of recognise that as something that we experience and we want to promote. And we talk about that really as the importance of government being both responsive, so able to listen and be empathic with citizens, to be inclusive of their needs and also of the needs of government, to think systemically around a whole systems mindset, a mindset of abundance when you actually take account of a broader set of human capabilities, and also to make sure that we're evidence-based and impactful. So for us, those are the kind of cornerstones of the work that we're doing. And as I said at the start, we don't talk about best practice. We talk often about next practice. And if one thing the lab exists to do, it is to help find that next practice. And this is the ways of working that we don't yet know. They might work somewhere else. It might already be happening here, but they haven't been tried and tested in our environment, in our lab space. So we instead have the best process that we use, and that's our kind of common ground. And through that, therefore, we use the Design Council's Double Diamond. We add an earlier stage called Diagnose, which is really about us, because we're working so early in policy making. It's pre-discovery. And so sometimes we work with teams who have a very clear idea of what they think they want to deliver, but they still want to be challenged. And in other cases, it's much more broad and open. So instead of doing the traditional thing of jumping straight in, using traditional kind of customer analysis and so forth and surveys, and then coming up with pilots and taking it to scale, we challenge and use the design process instead. So finally, in terms of our work, there are 5 things. We work with Lucy Kimball at Central St Martin's, and she helped us really uncover what is it about lab that's different. She published a short book on it, and these are her 5 things. And if you're interested in seeing more, we try and publish as much as we can. So we have an online toolkit. We do quite a lot of talks, videos. There's a TED talk by Kat, who's in my team, that's really worth looking at. But all of it is there, to be used. If you're using it, by all means, feedback to us if you have adapted it and applied it in a different way. So we see ourselves as being part of a global community of people who want to do this kind of work, and really that's why I'm here tonight as well, to hear from you. Thank you.